Qualifying for the Wafway 500 here at Hyper Speedway, just about ready to go, as these cars take on maybe the fastest track in this sport as far as overall speeds go. This is a very fast course, doesn't have a ton of turns involved, which causes a pretty easy lap most of the time. There's the qualifying order on your screen, starting with Jack Tato and Mozilla, who failed to qualify last week, then Spitzer, Prime, and Neptune, Murakami, Winx, Sal, Bloodstorm, and Earl. That's the bottom 10 from last week. Top 10 looks like this: Oak, Woodpecker, and Streamer, Confetti, Nugget, and Quillo, Piper, and then the final from last week, Steve and Electro, all leading up to last week's winner, Lemon Drizel. Something to keep an eye on as we get ready to go. Keep an eye on the Red Pandas racing cars. When we get to one of them, I'll tell you why you should pay attention to them this weekend. But first, let's start with Jack Tato, who had a very disappointing end to their qualifying run, ran a 7-second lap last week on the second lap of qualifying, which cost them a chance to get into the race last week, and really disappointing at Mayhem Super Speedway last week for the Misfortune 400. They've had a lot of speed overall. You see the numbers are really good even with that DNQ, as Jack Tato ran the slowest laps overall last week. Looks like a solid start again. You got to see once we get into a few more cars exactly where that line is going to line up. It's a 3:45 for Jack Tato to start. And now one of the cars really struggling so far, that's Mozilla in the 66 for Coos Motorsports. It has been a disappointing start to the season for this new team, especially for Mozilla. Still in the 66, but with a brand new team, you can see just one heat win, including a DNQ. That happened last week. They are averaging just a 14.5 average finish and qualifying position. So it's been a disappointing run. This is a good track, though, for Mozilla, and we'll see what they can do here. Looks like a pretty solid run. Slows down a bit there toward the end, and it's going to come out to a 3:51 as the qualifying time for Mozilla from the inside line. Here is the 25 of Spitzer. Of course, this is the Wafway 500, so Waf's Bowling Alley is the sponsor for this 25 car, as always. Not great numbers here at Hyper Speedway, and also not great numbers on the season. Just 3 heat wins through the first 4 races of the year. Has been a disappointing start for Spitzer, who really hasn't had a whole lot. It's been a very generic start to the season for that 25 team. Haven't had much of anything. Big spin there coming into turn 2. Kept it pretty straight, though, and that's going to be a 3:52 is the time. Slowest lap, but by just 1/100th of a second. And so far, everybody pretty compact there as far as the qualifying times go. So here is the 17 of Prime, who continues to struggle really ever since that opening race of the season last season. Ran the 8 car that year. So far this year, averaging finish and qualifying both worse than 15th. Have a DNQ. They also have a DNQ at this racetrack as well. Only a couple of heat wins this season for Prime. It's been a disappointing run. They snuck into the race last week, and then were knocked out pretty easily by the OB Racing team. However, that looks like a pretty good lap right there. Actually, not as fast. I guess it was just a very smooth lap, no issues, but that could cause even more problems since Prime is now seemingly running good laps, but still the speed isn't there. That's just a 3:52. Neptune in the 11 gets ready to go. Did not qualify for this race a year ago in race number 5 of the first season of NASMARB. A win, only 1 finals appearance, and an average finish of worse than 10th, despite a victory to start the season for Neptune, who really has to kind of pull things back together here after a really hot start to the season with that victory in the first race of the year. They've seemingly struggled since then, and Neptune slowing a bit there toward the end, but this is still going to be the fastest lap so far. A 3:4 for Neptune looks pretty good. Good start. The fastest lap, the track record belongs to Woodpecker. That's a 2:64. Red Pandas Racing. As we mentioned, you keep an eye on them. That's part of the reason why, as Murakami gets ready to go in the number 4 for Flair. Another tough season for Murakami, who really picked it up toward the end of last season, but doesn't have a whole lot as far as positives so far this year. So here we go. From the inside line for Murakami in the 4. Looks like a pretty good line there. That's a good lap. Had the speed, had the consistency, and it's the fastest lap of the day. A 3:28 for Murakami. And a very solid lap there from the number 4. So that is certainly exactly what you're looking for as we get ready to go with Winks in the number 13. Finished 5th in this race a season ago, as the struggles that we have seen are pretty significant from these teams for the Misfortune Racing teams. We've already seen 2 of the 3 now qualifying in this first half. We'll see Bloodstorm in just a couple cars from now, but it has not been a good run here so far for the first half of the season. As the spin and coming across backwards is going to be Winks, and that's going to be the slowest time of the day by 0.4 of a second, a 3.93. And that will be a disappointing run there. So here comes Sal in the number 1. For Fortune Racing, we've got Misfortune, Misfortune, Fortune, and then Misfortune coming up next with Bloodstorm. So Sal on the number 1, Killian on the hood, 6th place in this race last season. And the 8th car to qualify so far. Let's see what Sal has for him. Looks like a pretty solid lap. Not maybe as much speed as you would have liked. Pretty good, a 3.34. Solid lap, 2nd fastest so far for Sal in the number 1. And here comes Bloodstorm in the 86. For Flair and Misfortune Racing, as we mentioned, they've all been midway through the pack so far, if not a little worse than that. Bloodstorm has performed the best so far, with 7 heat wins for this team, a couple of fastest laps. Good qualifying and decent finishing, but you know they want to kick it up a little bit as well and have a little bit more success than they've had through the first half of the season. As Bloodstorm gets ready to go from the inside line. This looks like another fast lap. Pretty solid there, and that is the 2nd fastest time. In fact, it's tied for the fastest. So Murakami and Bloodstorm both running 3.28s, and a solid start. Here is Earl for Red Pandas Racing, and the Ukulele Emporium is back on the hood there. The shades of blue and white in that 33. There are the numbers this season for Earl. And you can see over there, 9 heat wins at this track, including a finals appearance for the driver of the 33, as lined up from the inside line is that 33 car, whipping around the first turn out of turn number 2. Looks pretty solid, banging off the wall just a tad bit. That'll be the 4th fastest time, a 3.36 for Earl. Solid, nothing spectacular, but nothing bad. As here comes Oak in the number 48. And there are the numbers on that car. 8 heat wins this season. They've had a much better year than they did through really the first half of last season, despite ending up winning the championship. Shockingly, might I say. That was a pretty big surprise. But off to a good start this season. Average finish around 9th. Hasn't been bad. Hasn't been the best, though. And you know Oak wants to turn it up a little bit toward the second half of this season, and they're going to do a pretty good running lap there. That's going to be a 3.36, tying them with Earl and settling into 5th at the moment. And here comes Woodpecker in the 43. So Woodpecker is the defending winner of this race in the 43 for Dave's Motors. They're also the track record holder and the previous pole winner. In addition to that, Red Pandas Racing has never lost here at Hyper Speedway. Woodpecker won this race last season, and here at Hyper Speedway, Lemon Drizel has won the other 2 races that we've run here. So they have a lot of success here. This is not a great lap, though. Bouncing off the walls in between turns 1 and 2, and this is going to come out to a 3.79. That's the 2nd slowest lap of the day here from the inside line. Disappointing there. Here's the 26 of Streamer with Marpsy on the hood. Runner-up in this race last season for OB Racing. Pole sitter a week ago. 11 heat wins on the year, 12 heat wins at this track. Never a winner, though. Told you just moments ago that Red Pandas Racing has never lost. If they were going to lose, this is probably who they would have lost to. Streamer has had a ton of success the most decorated driver by victories, although Lemon Drizel is right there now after Drizel won last week to tie Streamer for the most victories in NASMARB history, and Streamer has struggled a little bit this season. That's a 3.53, the third slowest time thus far from the inside line. Here is the 7 of Confetti. Getting ready to go in that pink and cream colored scheme. And the numbers this season a lot better than the numbers at this track for Confetti. This has not been a good place. Confetti finished 18th in this race last season, and we'll try to do a little bit better than that. Here's the 7 from the inside line, coming out of turn 1, now into turn 2 and out. Looks pretty good, bangs up against the wall just a bit, but still a solid time of 3.46 is good enough for 8th for Confetti. Okay, nothing to write home about, but certainly better than you may have expected from a car who has really struggled, or a driver who has really struggled here at this track particularly. Here's the 99 of Nugget for Coos Motorsports. This is another driver who's really struggled. Finished 17th in this race last season. And Nugget trying to get things turned around just a bit. Had a DNQ earlier in the season. Average finish of 12.5. Average qualifying of 12th. But got into the final 6. Ended up finishing 6th last week after being swept by Steve. This is not a great start, and getting a little loose on the back end there. This is going to turn into a 3.56. That's the 13th fastest time out of 15, and Nugget in some jeopardy here after a less than great run there. Here is Quillo in the 9. Nugget had a lot of confidence and momentum going into that final 6 matchup before being swept by Steve and then failing to finish 2 attempts at that 4th place consolation, ultimately finishing in 6th there. As you look at Quillo's numbers, pretty solid. A lot of speed this year. 3 fastest laps, 12 heat wins. An average finish of better than 9th, but Quillo can still make that even more impressive. That includes a DNQ. This is not a very good lap here, though. Pretty slow coming along that wall. It's going to be the slowest lap of the day, a 4.11 for Quillo. Maybe a little bit of a jinx there after I just mentioned how Quillo's had a lot of speed. That is not the case on that lap. Here's Piper, who finished 4th, won that 4th place consolation match to take home the 4th place finish a week ago. Really impressive numbers. 18 heat wins. 4 fastest laps, 1 finals appearance, and a lot of top 6 appearances. It's been a really impressive start to the career of Piper with the added 4th car for Red Pandas Racing. You can keep an eye on her with the success this team has had. That's a fast lap. It's the fastest lap of the day, a 3.18 for Piper as she goes to the top of the board. A 1/10 of a second faster than Murakami and Bloodstorm, and Piper is running first now, with 3 cars to go from the inside line. And then, of course, you still got to run the other line there. Here is Steve. A disappointing finals run, but impressive to get to the finals yet again. It's been a successful recent run for Steve, who's really starting to pick it up this year. Great qualifying speed. The average finish is there. The fastest laps are there. Heat wins, finals appearances. It's been a very good start to the year. Let's see if Steve can keep it up. And just when I say that, it's a spin. Got to get it going if you're Steve. They will. It's going to be a 5.13. And Steve's in big trouble here. Hard into the wall. Out of turn 2. And it cost Steve a lot of time. Over a second slower than Quillo. Oh, man, that's a disaster right there. As the 93 of Electro stands in. Not Texas Rollhouse on the hood today. They're on the back quarter panel, but it's a new sponsor for Electro and the 93 for OB Racing. This is Malbow, who was the sponsor for Steve, who we just saw a moment ago. That was Steve's sponsor last season. Here are the numbers. Not very good at Hyper Speedway. In fact, Electro, who didn't qualify for this race last season, has failed to qualify 2 out of the 3 times that we've raced at this track. Let's see what they can do. Spinning into turn 2. It's going to be another pretty slow lap here. And Electro is going to fall into 18th out of the 19 to run with a 4.16. Something about this track causing problems for Electro. Electro has 3 career DNQs. That's the most all time. So a very hit or miss car in that 93. Now here's Lemon Drizel back in the yellow, brown, and white. for Dave's Motors. There are the numbers. The numbers really, really impressive on the left side of your screen. The numbers on the right side even more impressive. Average finish of better than 4th. 5 1/4 for average qualifying. A couple of wins this season. 3 finals appearances out of the first 4 races. As Drizel with a solid lap here. Very smooth for the 3. And they are 1/100th of a second off the fastest time. And a good start for Red Pandas Racing, as they're going to have 1st, 2nd, and 6th there through the first inside line run. Piper, Lemon, Drizel, Murakami, Bloodstorm, and Sal, the top 5. Then Earl, Oak, Neptune, Jack Tato, and Confetti, the top 10. All the way down, a little bit of a surprise, Streamer running only 14th. Woodpecker, who was the pole sitter for this race a year ago, qualifying just 16th so far. Here's Jack Tato, had a solid run. This is not as good of a lap, though. It's a 3.61, average it to a 3.53, which if you average that out, that 3.53 is only in the second half of the teens there. So that would not be a great run. Here's Mozilla, and Mozilla with a solid run, average it to a 3.52, just enough to get ahead of Jack Tato there for first right now. Here is Spitzer. And Spitzer going to come across the line there with a 3.43 time. Here is Prime. Prime ran a 3.52. Not a terrible run by any stretch. And that is going to be a solid time there for Prime. Mozilla and Jack Tato right now, the 2 that are out. Here's Neptune. Oh, big spin there. Slid up against the wall, and it's going to cost Neptune some time, but still not a bad lap at all. A 3.47 average time will be second fastest right now, as Neptune is through. A lot of speed there, but a big slide at the end is going to cost a lot of time for Murakami. Ran a 3.28. This one is just a 4.09. And it's a 3.69 average. That is last right now for Murakami. It's going to lock Mozilla into the race as we have a look at Winks. And Winks' lap is okay. Nothing great. That's a 3.69. And when you average it out, it's a 3.81. Jack Tato's going to go racing tomorrow. As Murakami no longer at the bottom. 6th out of the 7. Here's Sal in the number 1. Ran a 3.34. This is not as good of a time either. A 3.48, but it is still enough to be fastest at the moment with a 3.41 average time. So you'll certainly take that if you're Sal. Not going to be enough to do any sort of pole sitting, you'd assume. This is a pretty good lap there for Bloodstorm, and Bloodstorm's going to go to the top. That's a 3.11, fastest lap of the day. Average it to a 3.20, and Bloodstorm with a 2/10 of a second advantage right now. Here is Earl. And Earl runs a solid lap, pretty good. Good enough for second right now. That's a 3.18. Last 2 drivers have been real fast. 3.11 for Bloodstorm, the fastest lap of the day. Earl just equaled Piper's lap from the first run of 3.18. Now here's Oak. Oak's trying to get things going. Gets into the wall there out of turn 2, and it's going to cost him some time. It's still a 3.47 average time right now for Oak. Still got some slower cars that struggled toward the end, but certainly not loving it if you're Winks right now with that 3.18 average time. Here's Woodpecker. Woodpecker bouncing off the walls back and forth. Not a very good run here for Woodpecker, and they're going to fall out to a 3.93. That's the slowest time of the day when you combine inside and outside. Murakami's going to go racing as they're in. Here's the 26 of Streamer looking for a better lap from the outside, and that was not a very good lap either. And Streamer just barely in. A 3.96 is 11th out of the 13 cars to go. This is a very interesting storyline. Streamer, who's had a ton of success basically every time they've stepped foot on that racetrack. Here's Confetti, nearly spun out. Really slowing, and Confetti in some big trouble here. That's a 3.92. Winks is going to go in racing as they are through now. However, Confetti still able to beat out Woodpecker by 1/100th of a second. We'll keep an eye on whether or not that's going to be important there at the end, as the 99 of Nugget runs through that time. Pretty solid time there, run all the way up to 5th place when you average the two together. Pretty good there. And here is Quillo, ran a 4:11, so this is one of the cars that you can keep an eye on, whether or not you can get around him if you're one of those two cars at the edge. And this is not a good lap from Quillo by any stretch. It's slower than the first one. Average it to a 4:22. Confetti's in the event, and Quillo's in some big trouble here. That was not a good lap again for Quillo. Now here comes Piper. Fastest lap from the inside line. What can she do when you combine it with the outside line? She is going to be third. A 3:52 will average to a 3:35, and the first pole in the career of Piper is going to elude her. As Bloodstorm still in the lead. Now here's Steve. Steve ran a 5:13. Got to turn it around. This is not going to do it. Spun entirely around, and it is going to be just a 4:76 average. And so that is that. Steve is almost certainly not going to make this race. Woodpecker is in as we go forward to Electro. Electro trying to qualify. It's been a tough one for Electro, but they are in with a 3:86 average. Steve will not qualify for this race. A very disappointing run. Now Lemon Drizel, who will have a chance at the pole. Into the wall there, trying to keep it going. This is not as good of a lap. It is not going to be enough for the pole. It's going to average to a 3:45 and a 6th place finish for Lemon Drizel, and Bloodstorm takes the pole with the fastest lap of the day. Ran a 3:11 from the outside line. They averaged it to a 3.20, and they are the pole sitter for the Wafway 500. Very impressive there. Followed by Earl, Piper, Sal, Spitzer, and Lemon Drizel. Those are the top seeds. Nugget, Oak, Neptune, and Prime are the top 10. Down at the other end, failing to qualify for this race are Quillo in the number 9, who just ran not very good laps, and then big struggles on the laps from Steve, including that disastrous first lap, as the number 32, despite making finals appearances in back-to-back races, will not go racing in the Wafway 500. Bonus point goes to Piper for the fastest inside line lap, and 4 bonus points as Bloodstorm runs the fastest outside line lap, as well as the pole position with the average, so they pick up the 3 points for that. There's a look at your groups as we get ready to go. Some adjustments going to be made, and we'll see what the drivers can do. Group 1 is Bloodstorm, Neptune, and Woodpecker, then Earl, Prime, and Confetti in Group 2. Group 3 is consisting of Piper, Oak, and Electro. Sal, Mozilla, and Winx. That's an interesting group there in Group 4. Group 5 is Spitzer, Jack Tato, and Streamer. And then Lemon Drizel takes on Nugget and Murakami in Group 6. So, should be a very interesting race as we get going for race number 5, the second half of the season, getting underway. And we are just about ready to go. We'll take the night and see you tomorrow for the main event. But until then, I'm Ricochet, and you've been watching a presentation of MSPN.